that's a good thing. So I can see you. Woo, I can see you all, right? Okay.
Macianie cała. Ja jem stachowany. A ten, który razem się kawałem mi no
Okay. Very good. Let's start out slowly. You all got our letter, right? I hope. And so whatever was in there. I just have something here, a book just out, and on this book you can see how I looked once, and my dear wife too. And you can let that go around. She's up there too. Then you know the whole family. Okay, I have all your folder here. So everybody gets a grade after each session here. You all get A++ afterwards, and you will go to heaven then. Okay, and the last time we introduced ourselves already, so we know each other already. Does everybody know everybody? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm John Chu. I'm a PhD candidate in sociology.
Okay, and there is another one with you. Another one wants to come.
I'm the only one I know of.
Really? Oh, there is another one there who signed up for it. But okay, we will see. Okay, so we know each other. We introduced, last time we had a movie about us, and so we introduced ourselves, but you know me anyway. Yeah, right. Okay. So I asked you to get the syllabus and to print out the syllabus. Did everybody do this, or
I did, but I
you don't have it yet, right? Okay, so this is what the syllabus looks like here. But before I do this, our ladies here are in pedagogy. They are in education, and so the critical theory of society has also a pedagogy, an educational thing, and I printed it out for you, so everybody gets a copy, and you can read that for yourself. So, because we want to relate ourselves to your fields, what you do, sociology or pedagogy and so on. So, and this here is the syllabus, so that's what we should print out, so that we have it with us here. Okay, so here is another thing about the pedagogy. I don't know if you ever saw that lesson. It is on my website too, and so everybody can get one. Now there are some which are bad, and because my printer malfunctioned.
There is enough, Dr. Siebert, for everybody. There is enough now.
We have enough now, okay. So we can put the others
You have one?
down here.
You have one? I think now, you did one? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then here we can put that on the table, and whoever comes later on can get that too. Dustin, could you put this over there?
Yep.
Put it on the table, and then the other thing which was supposed to be printed out was the roadmap. But I have a few more which I can give to you. So everybody gets a roadmap. These are the instruments which we need to get into the critical theory of religion, not religion, but critical theory of society. Does everybody have one now? Or? So we can also put the rest of them over here together with that, and then you can pick it up afterwards, whoever comes later. Did somebody get lost in my basement?
Maybe.
Downstairs?
We'll see. It's no easy.
That would not be too good, right? Okay. Okay. So please print out the syllabus, right? And you have already the roadmap there, which contains, fundamental categories of the critical theory of the Frankfurt School. So that's what we want to concentrate on. And since most of you have not heard of it or were not in touch with it, we will go step by step, right? So simple step by step forward, because it's quite different. You all have a positivistic education, right? No matter if you come from Germany or from Europe or whatever. And so, therefore, to move over from positivism to a dialectical theory, that is a shock. So, therefore, we step very slowly, and we follow the syllabus there, step by step. Later on, you can do it yourself, but just in the beginning, so that we get into the vocabulary, and that we get into the logic of the whole thing. And nobody has to be afraid. You all make it in the end, and you make it well. So don't worry about it. We start every session here with something which is called the time diagnosis. Dustin does it. Dustin is a professor, and he does it in his classes. So, and we maybe want to start out with this today, to do it in a very simple way. So time diagnosis or time prognosis means that you take some event which happened yesterday or today, and which you get through the New York Times or through the Baltimore Sun or Washington, whatever newspaper, or through the television, or through the news, or through a movie, or whatever. And then we look at the facts. So what we call positivism is the philosophy or the metaphysics of what is the case. So the positivist is just concerned with what is the case. And what is the case is only the facts and the data which he gets empirically. And then he applies to it, for instance, statistics and so on, but he remains always on the surface. He does not want to penetrate in any way because he doesn't trust it. So let's do that. Just for once, let's start out with that. So let's take Iran, for instance. What has happened in the last 3 days or 10 days or whatever in Iran? So the facts. The facts are a treaty was made, not a real treaty, but an agreement with Iran about its atomic weapon. Not the atomic energy. They go on with atomic energy for electricity and so on, but it is not to be weaponized. So this is for years and years that went on, and finally last week on Saturday, that was finally done. So that is one fact. Another fact which was happening was 9 American Marine people, Navy people, in a little boat got into the sovereign waters of Iran, and they were captured, and they apologized. Many people here in the States were angry because they apologized. Yeah. But it is, of course, okay, one has to apologize. If I drive in my neighbor's garage with my car, then I'm sorry I drove into your garage. So that's normal among people, but we are not in a very normal situation. So this is another fact which happened. Then there was a prisoners swap. So 5 people from Iran were finally set free. One was a journalist and so on. One of them stayed in Iran, which is interesting. He was freed from the prison, but he wanted to stay there. Another one was a CIA fellow, and then a CIA contractor. He got lost. Iran does not know where he is. He may have gone in another country. Nobody knows. So, but these people came home, and they said they suffered something, but they didn't exaggerate it. So, to be in prison, I was a prisoner of war. It's never a comfortable thing, but there was no, particular complaints or whatever. So they were sitting in a small room, and they could only go out for an hour in the garden and so on. So this is all very uncomfortable, and one knows that. So, but the interesting thing was, for instance, those 9 prisoners whom they had caught, they were released. After 18 hours, they were released already. So that is a good sign when that happens. Then Iranians were sent back. So they were all people who had violated the embargo. So since 30 years, Europe and we have imposed an embargo on the economy of Iran. And these people whom we caught here, they violated this. That means they traded with Iran anyway. And so they were all pardoned, except one of them. He is under suspicion that he wanted to assassin an ambassador or whatever, so they kept him back, but all the others went home as well. So these are certain facts. And then we know that the negotiator, who is the president of Iran now, but was the negotiator before, he's an atomic physicist, so he knows at least quantum physics and quantum mechanics and so on. So he is called by us a technocrat. He's a technocrat. And then there are the mullahs. There is a certain aristocracy of mullahs who have studied law, Sharia law, and so on, and they are on top of the whole thing, and they are having a theocracy. That means they rule in the name of Allah. They know the word of Allah from the Holy Quran and other documents and so on, and then they translate it, And at the same time, they have a European constitution. They have a French constitution. That is an interesting. Not only do they have quantum physics, but they have a Western constitution, like Iraq has an American constitution. At the same time, also Shiites, and they would also like to have a theocracy if it would work. So these are all facts, and there is never any end to facts. So you can go on collecting for the next 30 years, and you will still not have exhausted it. So we still don't know really who killed Kennedy or who killed Martin Luther King and so on. So as far as facts are concerned, there is a bad infinity. That means there is no end to it. You can always find new things to look at and so on. Okay, so that is the empirical thing, what we need, first of all. And that is what we have in common with all your positivistic professors. So you are here in a totally positivistic university. There is no real theology at the basis, like you have it, in Chicago, for instance. So there is no real philosophy at the basis. It is a university which consists of positivistic sciences with their own methodology and so on. So why was that done? These types of universities, like Western, was built when the Sputnik happened. That means the people here, that is the American bourgeoisie, thought that socialists could not create a high level of technological culture. And suddenly the Sputnik came down in the Crimea. There's a museum, and you can see it all, and I looked at it. And we were shocked. And because we were shocked, we have to catch up. And so they built thousands of universities like Western. And they're all totally positivistic. That means no philosophy and no theology and so on. So they tried here to make our department a theology department. But after a few years, they found out about it. And it was all changed into what is called science of religion and so on. So it was not possible. So Miller Auditorium, Miller and Connie Lowe and Siebert building, these three, they wanted to have a theology department in a positivistic university under the American Constitution. That was insane. It could never go. One little thing there, see, when they say with ISIS, their ideology or whatever, ISIS does have, if you hate them or not, they do have a theology. And here they don't know what a theology is. So they cannot handle it adequately. So now for 14 years, we have shot and killed and so on and so on. And we are worse off than we were 14 years ago. ISIS has established new bases in Libya. And they go from one country to the other. If you do the same method all the time and you expect different results, that is the definition of insanity. So therefore, the time would come, or has come, that one uses another method, and in Iran, they use diplomacy. They did start talking finally, and talk may be cheap, but if you don't want to talk, you will kill, and you will be killed. That is the horrible alternative. So we better talk. Okay, so we have a few facts now about Iran. Now let's try to apply the critical theory, in spite of the fact that we don't know it yet, and some of its words and some of its logic to Iran with these facts on the basis. The presupposition of the critical theory is that it works with antagonisms. So in the religion department, we work with the antagonism of the religious and the secular. But here, in the sociology department, there is another antagonism between the classes, for instance, the working class and the capitalistic class, the bourgeois class, and so on. And then when you look at your roadmap there, on the third page, you all can have one. So I have a few more, so you can take. By the way, you all are pedagogical people, and so I brought you something, the educational program. And so let's see that everybody has something. So when you look at this third page, you'll see these antagonisms there between the religious and the secular, and so on and so on. There are 58 of them. So the critical theory starts with this presupposition. That means it looks for contradictions. It looks for oppositions. And so let's take from the religion department, that between the religious and the secular. This antagonism hasn't existed all the time. It came about only in the West. never in China. It started there, but it didn't take off. It started in Greece, but it didn't take off. But it started then in Italy and in Europe, in Central Europe, and so on, and it took off. Something which had never happened in the human species before. Before, there was a differentiation between the religious and the secular, but there was no antagonism, there was no hostility, there was no mutual attack and cutting off heads, and so on. So that was something new. In the Toprian Islander, the tribes and so on, you had a differentiation. When they fished in the laguna, the people, they would fish with technology. When they went out to the ocean, they would pray to ballooners to protect them. So there was a differentiation between the religious and the secular, but there was never an antagonism between that. Now with Galileo and Darwin and Marx and so on, the whole thing splits apart. You cannot understand what, let's see, Christianity in the West or Islam in the Near East when you do not presuppose that antagonism. Because calling for jihad means to defend Islam, which presupposes that Islam is perceived of being attacked. By whom? By modernity, right? By the modern Enlightenment, by the bourgeois Enlightenment. So Voltaire and Rousseau and so on. They suddenly said there are no angels. When you look at the Holy Quran and when you look at the Torah and look in the New Testament, there are angels. The Enlightenment says there are no angels. Then the Enlightenment says there are no miracles. Everything is lawful and so on. Then you look in the Holy Quran, and there are miracles, and there are miracles in the Torah, and there are miracles in Buddhism, and so on and so on. There you see the antagonism as it moves in, right? And so Europe went through a 30-year war, 1816 to 1848, and before already, and all of Europe was devastated, like Syria is devastated. So Europe, France, Germany, and so on were devastated. So that means modernity arose, and then not only this antagonism between the religious and the secular. When that happens, the religious groups in themselves become antagonistic. That means some religious people stay with the Holy Quran, read it literally, and are fundamentalistically, and so on. And other believers, and they're also believers, they open up to the outside, and so on, to the other culture, to secular enlightenment, and so on, to science, and so on. So, and not only that, there is, with this antagonism in the center, there is also then contradictions in the secular people themselves. So you find secular people, scientists in the universities, who are friendly to religion. If we had not friendly people in our university, we could not have a religion department. But then there are other modern people, and they want to get rid of religion. They say religion brings only strife, people kill each other, and so on and so on. So they want to have a totally secular society, because they think religion belongs to the childhood of the human species, and therefore we have to get rid of it as fast as possible. Grow up, they say, grow up, don't be children anymore, think for yourself, and so on and so on and so on. So now, let's apply this very simple concept now. Antagonism between the religious and the secular. Antagonism inside of the religion between people who are open for modernity and others who are not. And secular people who are still open for religion and others who are not. When we apply this now to the facts and the data which we got from the news yesterday and so on, then we can see you have, for instance, the Ayatollahs. The Ayatollahs are very traditional people. They read the Holy Quran and the Sharia law as it is written literally. That's their whole life. And they apply that then to their society in the name of Allah, theocracy. And so that is the most traditional group. But suddenly you have others there, and they are in the government now, and the Americans call them technocrats, and they call them pragmatists. What is a pragmatist? A pragmatist is a guy who is ethical. He does not kill, he doesn't lie, he doesn't steal, as long as it works. But if it doesn't work, then he begins to kill and to steal and so on. And that is not all. This is normal people, without reflecting on it, are very pragmatic. So we are happy then that in Iran we have these pragmatic guys. They know quantum physics, like the negotiator. And these are the people we can talk with it, and we call them moderate people, if they are moderate or whatever. They are believers. They still have the turban. They are believers, and at the same time, they know what science is about. And they have invited people who have built the atomic energy complexes in Iran so that they could have built a bomb, and that is now, hopefully, they say, it is prevented. Now you see the whole difficulty, because those pragmatists and those technocrats, they will say, but India has the bomb, Pakistan has the bomb, Israel has the bomb, 100, and South Africa has the bomb, and we sit in the middle and we don't have a bomb. So there is this self-preservation, which not only individuals have, they want to survive, self-interest, self-preservation, states have that too. So they say they can do horrible things to us when they suddenly say, if you don't do this, we throw the bomb on your head, and so on. So therefore there is an urge, but then come those states which have it already. Where we are sitting, we used it the first time. We killed already 140,000 people with 2 bombs, and we had more, and Truman stopped it. Otherwise, they would have thrown 10 on Japan if Truman had not stopped it. No?
What stopped them of throwing more than 2?
Yeah, right.
What was the reason that they didn't do more than 2?
Well, when Truman came in, Roosevelt had already made the decision, so he didn't make any decisions anymore. But beyond 2, then he had to make the decision, and he refused to do it. And it was not necessary at all, because Japan, 2 weeks earlier, already made clear that they would surrender the emperor. So it was not necessary anymore. It was not necessary against Japan, but it was necessary against Russia, which was marching through Manchuria toward Japan and wanted to participate in the war. And the same thing in Germany, the Dresden, which was as bad as the bomb of Hiroshima, just several bombs, so many of them. And there it was not for the Germans anymore, they were defeated, but it was for the Russian army, which went into Central Europe and wanted to participate, and maybe they were afraid they would not keep the Yalta Agreement or the Potsdam Agreement or whatever. Okay, but that's on the side. Let's go back to Iran. So what we see is we have in the same Islamic community, maybe in the same Shiite community, we have 2 groups of people, namely some who are for the revelation, for the tradition, for the Holy Quran, and then you have people who are also still believers, without doubt, but who are at the same time have studied quantum physics and know how to do it and are technicians and so on and so on, and they have done the negotiations. So we have the struggle between the great world religion, Islam, and modernity, bourgeois modernity, that's what we are, and then you have a socialistic modernity, which is in China, in North Korea, and Cuba, and so on around the globe. And so that is the next type of enlightenment. And in Afghanistan, the Taliban and so on thought, and Bin Laden thought, that he had conquered one type of modernity, namely the socialistic one, the Russians in Afghanistan, with our help, by the way. And then, after that was done, they turned to the older one. That's us. That's the Americans. That's September 11th, and so on. So, therefore, we see this antagonism, but then we also see that in the religious groups, we have a split among them. So that is what the critical theory gives us. We get the data from outside. We apply to the data fundamental categories, and how we get them and how they are constructed and so on. That's another story. But we just start on the surface for a moment. So we see then there is this main antagonism, and then inside of Islam there is this split in itself. And these people then, also in Judaism, also in Christianity, those who are tradition, for instance, mullahs, may be suspicious if those others who open themselves up to the West, if they are really Islamic people. And those who open themselves up may look at ISIS and others and say, if they are really Islamic people, if they are really genuine. So the same with the Orthodox rabbi will say to the conservative rabbi, you are not a real Jew anymore. And he will say to the Reformed rabbi, you are not a real Jew anymore. And so we go to the rabbis, we go to the imams here, we go to the priests and the ministers and so on, so that they tell us themselves what they are and where they stand, so that we don't impose anything on, but let them do the talking. And I had, the Ayatollah here, and we had a long talk about this, and it was very beautiful. And we had imams here, and so on, so that we help each other. We are supposed to go to Iran there. They have invited us already for years to present exactly that, what we are doing here now, the critical theory, but not of society, but mainly the critical theory of religion. So, so one has to think things through first. It's relatively easy to cut somebody's head off. It is much more difficult, to see what is in somebody's head and talk with him, and maybe come to an agreement. Maybe you say, we have to agree to disagree. That's fine. You don't have to kill him for this, right? Okay, so that is what we just did, but it is not only now as far as these antagonisms are concerned. They come from somewhere, and there was an original union between the religion and the secular. Then comes modernity. Then we have this modern thing, right? It wasn't there in old China, in old Greece, or old Africa, or whatever. But then is also the question now for the future. Is there a possibility of a real reunion again in the future? And what would religion look like in this reunion? And what would the Enlightenment look like? So both will have to change and so on. In the meantime, we want to keep open the discourse between the religion and the secular, so that it is not cut off, by the fundamentalist people. And all religions have fundamentalism. Fundamentalist is not a bad guy. A fundamentalist is a man who has been hit by the Enlightenment and is frightened that everything flows away, that he doesn't know what to tell his children anymore, that he doesn't know what his grandchildren, how he should treat his women, how he should treat their husband, and so on. The whole thing starts floating away, and then he gets frightened and he runs back to the religion of the fathers. The old Islam, the old Judaism, the old Christianity, the old Buddhism, the old Confucianism, and so on, in order to find some hold in life. What he probably should do is to go through this crisis, and come out on the other side with what is called a second naivete. Let me give an example out of music. Let's see, you study modern music, or Alban Berg, or Beethoven, or whatever, and then you become a scientist. You go to our musicology department, and then you analyze Beethoven, and you say, well, there he was too loud, and there he was too fast, and he should have slowed down, and he should have more trumpets, and so on and so on. So you become critical. Now people think, when you study music like that, you will ruin it. Well, what you will ruin is the first naivete. You will not listen anymore as you did before, because you now know what the composer did, and what he may have done wrong too. But when you come out of it on the other side, you may enjoy music now, even in a deeper and a better way. And the same thing is with religion too. One does not have to be afraid of higher criticism. That's the name to apply historical studies to the Torah, and also someday to the Holy Quran. That is something which many people are frightened of. It has been done for the Torah, it has been done for the New Testament, and so, but one doesn't have to be frightened of it. One comes out on the other side. One does not look in a childlike way anymore. One has grown up in the meantime, but one can still be a believer, and one can still take religion serious, and maybe more serious than one did before. Okay, so that is the fundamentalist thing, and that we have in all religions when they get confronted with enlightenment. So fundamentalism is a modern thing, right? It is not Middle Ages. There were no fundamentalism in medieval Islam or medieval Judaism or whatever. It presupposes the attack of modernity, of the Enlightenment. Okay, so, and you can also see when individuals think, let's see Bin Laden for a moment. He studied in Boston. He found Americans who were very nice people. He liked them a lot and so on. So he knew the whole territory when he got engaged in all of this. But that in a certain sense, he was open for this, but he saw something in America which was fundamentally hostile to religion. What did he see? He saw the students, the Islamic students like you, coming from the Near East. And he was frightened that if they would study now engineering or whatever, everything in the university is functionalistic. And so he was frightened that as the students develop their functional and their instrumental rationality, that the other side of their rationality, their communicative rationality, would get lost in the process without them noticing it. And it is this communicative rationality in us which is the basis of religion. And so he thought simply by people studying all that positivistic instrumental stuff, they would lose the very basis on which subjectively their religion rested. And so that they would come home then from America through Cairo and into Saudi Arabia or whatever, and they would suddenly, not that they would be against Allah or against the Holy Quran or whatever, they would simply not know how to deal with it adequately anymore, because the rationality which is necessary for this had been suffocated. So in the West, see, we have wonderful airplanes, and you fly in them, and there are miracles of technology. At the same time, our marriages fall apart, our neighborhoods fall apart, our inner city falls apart, and so on. So we have paid in the West a high price for this tremendous instrumental rationality, for which most of you come in order to learn that, if it's engineering or whatever it is. And but on the other hand, the West has paid a high price, so it is the communicative rationality which has suffocated, and Bin Laden and many others saw that. So it's also for the Western people, it is a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing for all of us, yes.
Is it, was it necessary to have family split apart and to lose on this side to have a good advance in technology? Or they made some mistake on the social side that they didn't necessarily need to do, but they still could have the technology?
Well, did they make a mistake? Right? I think how it happened was they promised both. So at the beginning of modernity, when the split occurred, they made promises not only in technology. So, the great artists of the Renaissance, they painted already U-boats and airplanes and so on. They had that technology vision already. But at the same time, they still thought of great constitutions and a great type of society and great type of friendship and love affairs and so on and so on. So they still thought in both terms. So the split, just another antagonism between the communicative rationality or mimetic rationality on one side and the instrumental or functional rationality, that occurred later, and it simply happened to them. That means they were able to go forward and build the U-boats and build the tanks and all that what they had foreseen. But the other things, to build a constitution where people would not kill each other anymore and so on, or nations, and so that didn't work out. But they had the program of the UN already, the program of the Holy Alliance or the League of Nations and so on. But it did not work so well as the airplanes worked. Just think these things which you see flying there, 100 years ago in Michigan, there was nothing of this. No car, nothing. So on one side, we have to say that the Western bourgeoisie produced technological miracles all over the place, physics and no metaphysics, only physics and no metaphysics. So therefore, why so many people are attracted by ISIS? ISIS gives them a metaphysics, and they don't have one here. And therefore they don't know how to respond to it. This was from the beginning a society without metaphysics, the only one which has ever existed without metaphysics. So that the helplessness which you see on television of the Anchorman and so on has something to do. How do you deal with somebody who has a metaphysics and then you don't have one and you don't know how to respond? So then you tear them down. They bring those girls over there. They do our girls over there. And they become ISIS brides, and so on and so on. That's not the core of the whole thing. They cannot get to the core because they don't have a core themselves anymore. That is the issue, right? So those people who study what is going on over there have to study themselves at the same time. That is what is called self-consciousness, that we know we produced ISIS because Baghdadi was put into a concentration camp in Baghdad, out of Baghdad, for 4 years. That is where ISIS was born. And they fired the bad generals, and so on, who then went over to ISIS. And that is the whole military success from Syria into Iraq. Last week they were inside of Baghdad there. And they have been there before and bombed and so on. So they are there in the capital already. So, and they will go on because the bad generals have been trained in the school of Zhukov, who conquered Hitler, who is a dialectician, and they taught him, like General Giap in Vietnam, taught the bad generals how to do dialectical warfare. Small groups, attacking, withdrawing, changing the theory in new experiences, attacking again, and when they withdraw, we think we won, and next week they are there again. The same way with General Giap, we won, and then comes the Tet Offensive. Then they disappear again, and then we say, we won, and suddenly they are in Saigon. That is dialectical warfare, right? And they have repressed it here. Why? Because in the Great Depression, then they thought that if people would think dialectically, that means they would think in opposites. They would say, why are those people so rich on one side? With Bernie you have it now, and the others, are so poor on the other side, the majority and so on. So that means they discover the class antagonism, and then they may do something about it. And the economy is already destabilized. They did not want people's thinking to be destabilized as well, right? So now that is why, we are some kind of minority position. I'm very grateful to the sociology department, which for 50 years, allowed me to teach here. But we are, I think my PhD candidates, I don't think the sociology department ever understood really what they did if they went about Horkheimer or about Fromm or any of the critical theories. But they were tolerant enough to let it go. And so other people outside, what, you are doing this, in this hick town or whatever? Yes, we're doing it. And I think it's a beautiful thing, and that the university has always tolerated, in spite of the fact that it is positivistic. That is a great thing, right? So people can, approach the world in different ways, and as long as they don't kill each other off there and do not allow them to think, that is still a good situation. If Trump comes in, if fascism comes in, that would all end, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on what Ahmed said, or this question, because we were talking about the rise of instrumental rationality in the West, which inevitably causes a diminishment of communicative rationality.
Yeah.
I think what he's asking, especially with the question of was it a mistake, I think there is the question of is it inevitable if you develop instrumental rationality that your communicative rationality diminishes, or is it something that, especially as the Muslim world is looking to, develop some kind of Islamic modernity, can they keep both, or is it inevitable? Is that the lesson we've learned in the West, that the family falls apart if you want the computers?
I mean, this is in general, are these antagonisms between the classes or between religion and secular, is that necessary as such, right? That is a question. Necessary in a superficial way. Could it have been avoided, So you could say, if the church had behaved differently and would not have shown Galilei, the torture instruments and so on, would that have opened it and so on, But there may be a necessity among that simply when you use so much energy and imagination and all that in order to build U-boats and to build tanks and to build cars and to build airplanes and so on, you have only so much energy. Civilizations have so much energy. And we always need instrumental rationality. See, we can never avoid this because we have the metabolism with nature. So you need technology in order to plant things and fruits and to feed people and to clothe people. So therefore, every civilization, primitive or advanced, or no matter how advanced in the future, they will always have the metabolism with nature, and they will always have to struggle for food and for water and for air and so on and so on. So that is unavoidable. But at the same time, there is also the other thing, which is as necessary for survival, that our families don't crash further and so on. Because family means marriage, poverty, and education. So if the father is not there, can you still educate adequately? If the mother is missing, divorce or whatever, can you still educate? If you have no property, no house, no income, can you educate your children? And if you don't educate them, then you have to give it to the police or to the psychiatrist or the psychoanalyst and so on. So that means the instrumental rationality is definitely necessary for our survival and will be always as long as we have this body and we need food and clothing and housing and so on and so on. But the other thing is not less necessary. We do not survive. It is somehow when you have an insect which loses one antenna, for instance, in its head there, it cannot find its way anymore. And a civilization which does not have both instrumental and communicative rationality will not find its way, and it will disappear like so many civilizations have disappeared. So, therefore, yes, the differentiation may be necessary. That means that the two are fully developed and they differentiate. But must the differentiation go so far that one of them gets lost in the process, that one becomes so technological anymore? Just take a thing which we have on campus very often. There's a girl, and I'm thinking of a special case. She was pregnant the second time and still had no husband and so on. So she goes to the doctor again, and he says, "Why are you not rational? I told you to go on the pill," and so on and so on. The doctor means instrumental rationality, to use the right means for the right purpose and so on. But the girl would say, but love must be spontaneous. And there is another rationality of the heart, which is also logical, but it's a different logic. And so you have this right in the doctor's office. You have the confrontation between the two. And both of them are right in a certain sense. Of course, she should not have a child if she doesn't have a family, and so on and so on. So that's instrumental rationality, and that's what we all are. That's how we function and so on. But the other side, what she says, and what is underestimated, namely that if you bring too much technology into the love, birth control, whatever, you objectivate it, you reify the relationship and so on. So when somebody says, I don't want to go on the calendar or whatever, because these are instrumental rationality things which you apply to a human relationship, to communicative action. But the doctor would say, you are damn it romantic, how many more do you want to have, and so on and so on. So there you have a real hostility between the two forms of rationality, and one has won, the instrumental rationality. The doctor has won. See, his instrumental insight, and the politicians will say, don't pay them family allowances in the slums and so on. Then they will have more children and so on. It get only worse and so on. So, but the whole civilization has this dominance of the instrumental rationality. You could say probably that in the evolution of the civilization that there was a certain necessity that these two were differentiated. But it was not necessary that one would lose out so much as it has done in the West, because this damages the very existence of this civilization. Obviously, we are not able, for instance, 80 Americans are killed every day. 80 Americans every day. We have every 2 weeks, we have a mass killing, which means more than 4 people and so on. That is not normal. So that means the civilization, and not everybody happens. It doesn't happen in Germany. It doesn't happen in France. It doesn't happen in Canada. It happens here. So there must be something here which is the most technocratic of all societies, the most technical one. Before the Second World War, Americans were not so good, for instance, in heart operations. The Germans were best. And then during the war, the Americans moved to the foreground. So they do wonderful technological operations of the heart and all other parts of the body. But we have paid an enormous price of this. It wasn't always like this. When you have an American who happens to me sometimes, and he pats on your shoulder and said, "Good man," or whatever. These are residuals, of a more communicative past. As a matter of fact, of a more religious past, when Americans were still more religious and so on.
You don't do that in Germany. They never.
No, they don't have it in Germany. But when they call you by the first name here right away, that is also some of that communicative rationality. So there are residuals of communicative rationality in an otherwise tremendously advanced technological thing. And now that's the most strangest thing, that sometimes this technological rationality, as far as it is, cannot really operate because of the communicative one being missing. Let me give you an example. New Orleans. New Orleans, a huge storm is coming. The water is warm. And when the water is warm, of course, the storm sucks up the energy and so on. So it came with great force toward New Orleans. It lasted 3-4 days. Everybody could see what is coming. All the meteorologists and so on knew it. And then the president thinks, that New Orleans should take care of it. The school buses, they should bus people out or whatever. But the storm was broad. It covered the coast of 3 states or so. They said, the states should take care of this and so on, and didn't do a thing. Why not? Because in the meantime, something had happened in the states. When the Great Depression came, there was Hoover first who deregulated, and then the catastrophe came. And then Roosevelt had to come in, and Roosevelt made the New Deal. And the New Deal took a religious element, namely the principle of subsidiarity, from the papal encyclical letter, and introduced it into the system. Subsidiarity means, yes, you can be liberals, you can be atomized, you can do your own thing, and so on, whatever you want to do, and so on. But what if you cannot help yourself anymore? Then somebody else has to come in, your family. And if your family cannot do it, the city has to come in. If the city cannot come in, then the state, or the federation, or the American Association of Nations, or whatever. That was the principle of subsidiarity. And the second Bush had, like Reagan before, had given that up because they thought the capitalist system would work again, and they would not need subsidiarity in the New Deal anymore. That's why they stopped to be Keynesians and went to the Chicago School and so on. And so, therefore, now the president was not in his head. The thought was missing. Therefore, because of this communicative thought, he could not think technologically adequate. He had these pontoons, these cars which can swim and which can drive in the streets. He had thousands of them in the desert from the Second World War. He could have mobilized them. They could have driven into the city, rescued people. Over 1,000 people died in it. Instead of that, they had 3 helicopters, and they took a cat from the roof or whatever. And so there, because of the lack of communicative rationality, that principle of subsidiarity, the technological side was inadequate. And people around the world said, how can that happen, that this technological America cannot even deal adequately with that storm and so on? Well, it happens because if you give up the communicative rationality to that extent, not even the technocratic thing will adequately function. Okay? So we have different antagonism, and you have them all in this on the roadmap. There are 5 pages or whatever, and we will be concerned, with all those antagonisms which have to do with society. But I just want to show you one example. Our time diagnosis takes place so that we start with an event, we start with the facts as much as we can, and then we apply the fundamental categories of the critical theory, its logic, its methodology, to these events. And that is what we have done. And then we are not only thinking, how was it in old Iran, the Persians, an unbelievable civilization with harmony between the state and between Zoroastrianism before the 7th century. You have Cyrus II, one of the greatest people, 500 before our turn of the time. Cyrus II, had a human rights declaration. That's what the Persians or the Iranians mentioned all the time today, in which according to which you could not have slavery, in which all religions were free. He marched into Babylon. There was almost no resistance. He took over Babylon. He restored the temple of Marduk. He rebuilt all the other temples. He brought the Jews back to Jerusalem. He sent the architects, Jewish architects, but they were his own, and they rebuilt the second temple there. And the Jews still praise him because of his greatness and so on.
Who's that? What's his name?
Cyrus II, yeah. So when you hear discussions today, when Iranians say, you Westerners, you talk about your human rights declarations and so on of the 18th century, we had that already 500 before, and there is some truth to it. For instance, that you can spend your own money, that nobody has the right to tell you how to spend your money, that you cannot have a slave, and so the Iranians are very, very proud, and they say, you emphasize the Greeks, with their big philosophy and Aristotle and so on, but you had slaves. We didn't have any slaves and so on. So what I want to say is, in Persia, you had a great religion, Zoroastrianism, in terms of the theodicy, a high-level religion, and the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have learned from it a lot. And this was in conformity, in harmony with the Persian state. This Cyrus II was a Zoroastrian, and he did everything in the name of Ahura Mazda. He left Ahura out. He always talked about Mazda. So in the name of Mazda, he conquered rather peacefully Babylon and restored the whole territory. So there, we have to think, that this, what we have here, this culture war thing, that this is not a normal thing, right? So there was a relative unity there. Then comes this modern antagonism, which Persia, for instance, never had. And then is the question, of a reunion of these. So dialectics is not only, to wallow in these contradictions and so on, but it means, can we get out of them? And you cannot get out of them if you don't know them well, right? So therefore our task is to know this class antagonism and so on, and antagonism between instrumental rationality and cumulative rationality, to study it thoroughly so that we don't fall into illusions. Because people always come, well, science has discovered something, for instance, the Big Bang theory, and now religion and science are friends again, and so on. A priest discovered the Big Bang theory, a Belgian priest, and this has been accepted by all scientists now. But that priest wrote to Pius XII in the 40s. He said, you cannot use this new discovery in order to justify Genesis. That means the creation of the world by one God, and so on. So that means the priest himself knew that you cannot. People have such a longing, to get rid of these tensions, of these culture wars, that they make up things. But if they are illusionary, then they will not help to reconcile. So we have to be utterly honest about this, also personally and on the level of civilization, that we don't take phony things. I had with His Eminence the Ayatollah. We discussed that, and he says Islam is a rational religion. Before we have Islam, we have reason. And so that means he thought of a medieval reconciliation, an original unity between reason and faith. And that really existed. It existed for Thomas Aquinas, and it existed for the Arabic Aristotelians in the North African coast and so on. But the reason which we have in modernity is not the same anymore as this. It is a positivistic, it is a nominalistic type of a reason, which is very different from that what was there in the past. So, and we cannot go back into the Middle Ages. The greatest mistake for ISIS is that they want to go back to a situation of the 7th century, the Caliphate of Damascus and the Caliphate of Baghdad, and this was a great idea of union of the Islamic world and so on. And so it is fascinating. It is a fascinating theological idea. But nobody, I cannot, with 80s, my 80s, I cannot go back and be 18 again. I don't even want to go back to 18 again. But even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So therefore also a civilization cannot return. And when you try to return, like it happened in Israel too, where there are people who want to go back to Solomon and David and so on, it can only get bloody, because you cannot restore things which have gone. They have passed. So the negativity of the historical process is merciless. When you are in the niche, you are in the niche. You see that in Hitler, and we will do a lot of this fascist background. We talk about the liberal background of the Göttingen theory, socialist background, and the fascist background. That is behind the fascist thing there. And you see with Trump how strong and powerful it is, how it sucks people into it there, and it will go on to the election and so on, and heaven knows what will come of it. So it's very powerful, and Hitler was a relatively weak dictator, but one who was at the same time enormously intelligent in terms of an artist, a politician, even a technocrat, and so on. So, but he timed well. When somebody said, you are attacking Russia, on the 20th of June, 1941 or whatever, and he said, no, Napoleon went 2 days later. He knew exactly. Or somebody said, Hannibal with the elephants came to Rome on this day. No, you're off. It was 3 weeks earlier. And he had not 10 elephants, but he had 120 elephants, and so on and so on. So that was amazing. His memory was amazing, and memory is part of the intelligence. So But one mistake was there, and that was that he was too late. He wanted to do what England had done 100 years earlier to colonize India, what the United States had done by colonizing Latin America and so on, and what the British and the Americans did in the Near East. All that territory which is burning now, that was British and French protectorate. So, but for the Germans, it was too late. They had their empire. And now they wanted to establish the same thing in Russia, what the British had done in England, in India, and so on. But it was 100 years, 150 years too late. That means you had already moved into the niche. History had already moved beyond Europe into the Slavic world and into the American world. So that Hitler declared both frontrunners, the war on them, the Slavic world and the American world, and they just squeezed them and crashed them right in the middle of them. And both of them, the Slavs and the Americans, appeared in the center of Europe in Thuringia and so on. So that means he only helped to do the opposite of what he had planned. And so ISIS has something similar. ISIS has declared war on Russia, and they have declared wars on America and so on. It's a hopeless situation in the long run. They can fight, maybe one should give them some room or state or whatever, but they cannot become a world dominant power or subordinate everybody under the caliphate or whatever. So, so this, just as far as the philosophy of history thing is concerned. Okay, so back to Iran. Is there any question about what we try to do, right? So without having any knowledge yet, we think of all these things, we try to use some of these categories and applied it to what was happening yesterday or happening tomorrow, and we saw where we're coming from, where Persia was. There was a European Union, and now Iran and so on is in this antagonism. This antagonism started in Europe, but it has been globalized, so it's everywhere. Now the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews, and the Buddhists, and so on, they're all threatened by the same thing, and therefore they could also help each other out in this process, what they want to rescue of their religion and how far they want to go along with the modern enlightenment and so on. But one has to know both of them.
So,
yes.
Again, is it avoidable, this antagonism?
Is it workable?
Is it avoidable?
Yeah. Well, I would say it would depend, if there is in man's rationality, if there is a logic in us, for instance, which makes this necessary. As it is in nature, you see, you have a seed, and then the seed begins to particularize and develops and so on. So maybe there is something in our logic where you can say a notion, the judgment, and the conclusion. So that this is a logic which is in nature and which is at work in us and which is also at work in the historical process. Well, that's part of it, but that is a long story, if that can happen. And so the great thinkers like Kant and Hegel and Marx and Freud and so on, they have all worked on this, right? So to find if there is such a thing. There is a conviction in a certain sense, when you think of a sentence, there is the subject and there's the copula and then there's the predicate and so on. So you have this triplicity which Kant discovered again. And so this triplicity may very well be there, that there is a certain union of secular and religion. Then comes this antagonism, out of which then somehow a new type of conclusion or reconciliation may come about, and that there is an internal necessity at work there. But we are so empirical, right, that we want to have a proof for this and so on. So therefore we have to be very slow. But when you see that the Persian had this triplicity, that the Hindus have this triplicity, that the Christians have this triplicity, that the Neoplatonics have this triplicity, it may look to somebody as if our reason was operating in terms of these triplicities, which goes through our grammar and goes through our sciences and goes through science itself and so on. The sun system and its particularization into the planets and into the singularity of the moons and the other bodies. It seems that this triplicity returns again and again, and was in the beginning of the bourgeois enlightenment that they rediscovered this again. And then, so, through Hegel and Marx, and then to the Frankfurt School, that is their ancestry, in a certain sense. But they were very careful about this. So, and we have to be careful. So we have to listen to our positivistic brothers and must take their corrections there. So France was very rationalistic. England was very empiricistic. We have become, like England, very empiricistic. So if you come with any forms of rationalism, Americans get suspicious, and the French think we are barbarians when we are only empirical. So that is the struggle in the Western mind, and we can go into that slowly. But we want to go step by step, and just want to start with this, what we did today, this analysis of the Iran event there, okay? And we want to do that every time, but in a little bit shorter way maybe, to take some kind of an event and then apply the logic and the words and the grammar and so on of the critical theory, which is different from the protocol sentences of the which you have in all the other sciences, where you say, ISIS struck again in Paris. That is a protocol sentence, but it doesn't get you very far, right? So that is the difference between the positivists. So what is good with the positivists is the collection of data and the statistics. They have developed forms of statistics which cannot be improved any longer. So good they are. But where they say what is the case with all the horror which is there, with all the suffering which is there, and then they say it is as it is, the glass is half full, and so on, that is where it gets wrong, right? That's where it becomes wrong. Where they separate also theory from praxis, and so the politicians have no political science, and the political science don't do any politics. That type of a dichotomy is also present. That is not very helpful. Okay, so the future thing, we had Persia as an example, and then the future, what are we doing with this? But the deeper the analysis of the antagonism goes, the more chance is there that we can find out what the next step out of this horrible thing is, out of this tremendous suffering. So the discourse of the critical theory is future-oriented remembrance of human suffering with the practical intent to diminish it. Any kind of a diminishment in Syria now, or now in Libya and so on, would be helpful. So, and the American way is, we have to do something about fix it. Well, some things cannot be fixed. You have to think them through in order to fix them. That is what is so hard for the American civilization. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Should I say it again?
No.
No, okay. Very good. Now, do you have any comments to what I said there so far?
So the answer is like possible.
Yeah, possible. Always possible. I mean, you could even go, which the critical theorists don't. You could go into nature, and you could say an organism, including the human organism. There is the body form, there is the assimilation process, and there is the genus process, and so on. Every organism has this, So life is exactly that: form, the exchange with the outside world, and the genus process, the reproduction process, and so on. And wherever you look, the squirrels or the birds or whatever, including ourselves, and to be humble enough, that we do belong to that life process as well, in spite of that we transcend it, and that we are more. I have my children; they all have this natural science education, and they drive me nuts when there is nothing beyond that. But it is certainly real. So that to think that family life and everything has a life presupposition. The organism is the presupposition of all this, also of religion, also of politics, and so on, and therefore it has to be taken seriously. It imposes limits on us, if you want to do something good, one can go only so far because biologically we are prevented to go any further. Let's take, the monks in India or whatever who live in celibacy. Most people cannot live in celibacy at all. And even those who can sublimate for some time, they may not be able to do it forever. So that means there are definite limits which the organism imposes on us and which even the saints have to eat and so on. So, okay, anything else? Any comment to it? What time is it?
7:45.
Okay. So we want to do the following thing. Maybe we can, for a few minutes, look at this thing there, the movie which is on top of it, which is a conversation about the critical theory. No, the other one. That is the next one here. So this one, Dustin, could we put it in? So we just want to take a few minutes. It is a conversation about the critical theory, so that we see a little bit. But in the meantime, please take the water there, and let's make a short break for 5 minutes, and the cookies and water. Would you like to get up? Would you like to walk around? You can walk from my house from this end to the other end there, wherever you want to go.
This is the old here.
Yeah, if you need to use the restroom,
the restroom up there, and there's a restroom over there. So you can just walk a little bit. And then can you undo it too at the end? I was in despair the last time.
Really? You couldn't get back to your channel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
الأساسي في لأن كل شيء له علاقة بالخارجية. كل مثلا ISS علاقة بالخارجية يبون هم هدفهم إن يتكلم إن هدفهم يبون يرجعون زمن الاختلاف. كيف؟ مثلا
could you just give me the water? There's some water behind the desk there. Should be on the floor. There's some. Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
It's funny, my dad always tells me, can you help me with my computer? I'm like, really on your mind.
Okay, here we have it. You can just sit there and rest and relax a little bit. Just a few. You have to push play again. So that is about our attempt to get out of the theory of critical theory of society, the critical theory of religion, and just a few steps how that was done. You have to push play there. Yeah, now it's right.
My brother would make this
Again.
right. That meant old-fashioned.
Welcome to the first in a series of introspective conversations on the critical theory
Now
of
this is
religion
the same guy
with
there
Professor
again.
Rudolf J. Siebert.
Still loud enough?
Professor Siebert is
A little bit louder. Can you all hear?
Sociology and comparative religion departments at Michigan University. He is also the foremost proponent of the critical theory of religion in the United States, known internationally for his views on the critical theories and their importance to the worldwide future of peace and understanding. Professor Siebert is the founder of the Center of Humanistic Future Studies at Western Michigan University and of 2 annual international conferences in Dubrovnik and Yalta for the Inter-University Center for Postgraduate Studies in Europe. He has written 15 books and penned close to 400 articles regarding religion and the trends towards alternative global futures. Join Professor Siebert now for his reflections on the critical theory of religion.
In the 1914, during the First World War. So that's about the beginning of the critical theory.
And they were rather optimistic, and when the war started, they were even...
That means the early critical theorists like Horkheimer, Adorno, and so on.
And then out of the horror of the war, these young fellows asked questions. They asked which great scholar or philosopher or thinker could help them in order to explain what was happening and so on. So
10 million people killed in the First World War.
Horkheimer and his friend Pollock and a woman from Paris who was related to Horkheimer, they had a little group together in which almost was a religious group in a certain sense, in which they wanted to create an island of happiness. They called it the island of happiness. They came from the middle class, they came from the bourgeoisie, but they were somehow alienated from this type of culture, and they tried to establish a new culture which had some religious elements. It failed in the end. There is a little
so that's Horkheimer, that's the founder of the whole critical theory,
which describes that first experiment. So we could almost say that the critical theory was a critical theory of religion before it became a critical theory of society. So, and when we started to develop the critical theory of religion out of the Frankfurt School and so on, we started with these first poetical attempts, which were quite impressive. I would say that sometimes people say that the Horkheimer became religious later in his life or so. Horkheimer was from the very beginning, he was raised Jewish in Stuttgart, and then also he was a member of the synagogue up to the end of his life in Switzerland. So there was always a religious underground, and what the critical theory really combined was Judaism on one side and modern enlightenment. Or concretely, they combined the Decalogue and the second and the third commandment, namely not to make images of the absolute, not to commit idolatry on one side, and on the other hand, the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, that the human mind, the human intellect could not move into the realm of the thing in itself. That was God, freedom and immortality. That man had to stay with the finite things, and Kant nevertheless, on one side, limited science, but he made also room for faith. And for Kant, while one could not say anything about God or freedom or immortality, one could at least see it as a postulate. That means we needed God, freedom and immortality as a postulate in order to be able to live a human life and to live a decent life. So in that sense, I would say the critical theory in itself had all the religious component, and all what we did was to emphasize and this whole religious teaching through 50 years in the Frankfurt School.
That is the old building of the Frankfurt School. It was bombed out by the Americans in March 1945.
Most closely related to the
it was built by a capitalist, by Weil, was his name.
One could say that our theory emphasizes one antagonism in civil society, and that is the one between the religious and the secular. And the critical theory of religion tries to persuade people not to close up the discourse between the religious and the secular fundamentalistically on one side, or positivistically and naturalistically on the other side. So the core of the critical theory of religion is to keep the discourse open.
So now comes, what Marx and Freud play a great role for the critical theory of society.
Learned a lot from Karl Marx. It has learned to turn around the idealistic dialectic into a materialistic one, and also concepts like productive forces or productive relations or surplus value and so on. Of course, first of all, Marx was not so new as it may sound. He was deeply rooted in the philosophy of Hegel, in his dialectics, and in Immanuel Kant, and he was also rooted even in the Hebrew Bible. And so the Frankfurt School is also sometimes, people have a prejudice that it is Marxist or is neo-Marxist and so on. But also the Frankfurt School is, of course, not only rooted in Marx, but also in Nietzsche and in Schopenhauer and in all the idealists like Schelling, Fichte, and Kant and so on. And then also, particularly in the Hebrew Bible, in the Decalogue, in the second and the third commandment. And this is true then also for the critical theory of religion, which we have deducted from the critical theory of society. Karl Marx was a Jew, and he was baptized Lutheran with his family, but he had a deep sensitivity for concepts like social justice, as we find it in the prophetic literature and in the Psalms and so on. As a matter of fact, the Capital is full of quotations from the Old and the New Testament and so on. So usually the bourgeoisie and bourgeois schools are always mentioning that opiate of the people. That was one of three definitions which Marx gave of religion in his critique of Hegel's philosophy of law. And so even if one takes this, and unfortunately bourgeois scholars never go any further than to the other two, but even if one takes the first one, what is wrong with opium if people are suffering, cancer patients or whatever? So even that betrays some sensitivity for religion. It can help people to mitigate their suffering which they have. The bad thing, of course, with drugs is that people weaken or are weakened in their ability to transform the reality in such a way that it corresponds to their ability. Because happiness means that my ability and my possibilities outside are corresponding. If I have no possibilities and I have this tremendous potential, I will be unhappy. And vice versa, if I have these possibilities and I have no potential or whatever, that is also a very unhappy situation. And so that is the disadvantage of all opiates, of course. And so in that sense, it is a critical thing, and we have to see that Marx, first of all, didn't invent this, but he got it from Hegel. And Hegel had
Hegel got it from Kant.
Hinduism.
That is where it really comes
if
from.
Marx was justified now to apply that to all the world's religions, what may have been true for Hinduism, maybe not even for Hinduism adequately, that is a very serious scientific question now. But the definition of opiate is not an entirely negative one. If one, what Marx has in mind is, the suffering of the people under capitalism. But there were two other definitions, namely that religion is the heart of a heartless world, and the outcry of the oppressed creature. This sounds prophetic. And these two other definitions have to be taken as seriously as the opiate one, and unfortunately bourgeois scholars forget this all the time. So then I would say that the critical theory and of religion, as we have developed it further, takes very seriously Karl Marx's Christology, namely there was once a poor man and the rich people murdered him. That is a very good Christology from below, and it would be much better in the discourse between Christians and Muslims and Jews if one would start with such a
That's
Christology.
where Jesus throws the capitalists out of the temple.
Instead of a Christology from above with the Trinity and the Incarnation and so on, which may be very hard to understand in a brotherly discourse with Jews and Islamic people. So this issue, there was once a poor man and the rich people murdered him. That would give the whole interpretation of the New Testament another perspective. But then Christianity is no longer in coalition with the ruling classes, with the corporate ruling class, but it is on the side of the poor, as they say, that means the side of the lower classes and the people who produce the surplus value, and not on the side of the rich who enjoy the surplus value without working for it.
So let's take Freud still, and then we stop it.
Freud has played an important role for the Frankfurt School. Already in 1930, there was a Freudian Institute in Frankfurt, and it was combined with the theory of society of the Frankfurt School from the very beginning. And we have a group of psychoanalysts who have partly been trained by Freud, and they came together and did research about the situation of the German workers. And they followed the great psychoanalyst form and developed a research instrument by which they tested 8,000 German workers in order to find out how many of them would be authoritarian personalities and how many of them would be revolutionary personalities. And they found out that maybe 10-15% on each side, that means 15% revolutionary personalities and 15% authoritarian personalities. And on that they based their prediction how much chance National Socialism or Hitler would have with the German working class. And their predictions were quite adequate. During the war, as I experienced it, there was always a certain percentage of workers who would follow Hitler fanatically and others who would oppose him.
That is Goebbels, the propaganda
would go to concentration camp for this. So in that sense, Freud played an important role. So, but they were also critical from the very beginning to some extent. Of course, to a large extent, Freud was, of course, an enlightenment person, but at the same time he also became a victim of the dialectic of enlightenment. So they, in a certain sense, critically negated Freud, but also they preserved that and elevated in a certain way, wanted to fulfill the great message of Freud.
Okay, here we can stop it. And we can look at the next one there. Yeah.
Why you...
Okay, now we have the questions, right?
Okay, just
We take the other one, the conspiracy, yeah, right.
So,
Okay, but later. Yeah. Okay, now questions. Are you comfortable there? Are you sitting there comfortably?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
I just noticed that you use always the term bourgeoisie, but not. But on the other side, you don't say proletariat, but you would say lower classes or working classes. Why not?
Yeah, I mean that is of course the class antagonism, right, as it has developed. So the French Revolution and our emancipation here was a bourgeois event. That is the third estate, right?
Yeah.
So you have the first estate, which is the clergy, like the mullahs in Iran, and then you have the second estate, the nobility. You have the third estate is the bourgeoisie, and the fourth one is the working class.
So
your teachers, we are all bourgeois. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but this working class would be called proletariat.
Well, today it's called precariat, right? So that means people who have a precarious lifestyle, who live from income to income or whatever, and cannot pay their rent or whatever.
So it's not anymore as Marx called it. This
well, proletariat means not only that you belong to the working class, but that you are aware that you are belonging to the working class. That means that you have a proletarian consciousness, that you know where you are in the economy, that you produce surplus value. So my cleaning women here, they come, and two of them, and I pay them $120, and they get $12. So both together get $24, and I give them $120. So that means $90 or whatever is the surplus value. That's why they come. But the guy who owns them, he lives in Miami. He doesn't do a thing. So he gets the $100, and they get the $12 each of them. So that somebody who is aware of that, the women are not aware of it. They think it's okay as it is. One of them wanted to find a labor union in order to protect them, and she was fired next day. So that is the class difference, right? And you go to a restaurant and you see the waitress. Yeah? The waitress gets $2.50, and the rest is to come from tips. See, no socialistic country has tips. because it's presupposed that your income will be just. But since it is not just here, we wager that she gets tips. Maybe she does sometimes and she doesn't. So you can see it, but if you don't see it, you are not a proletarian. A proletarian is somebody who has become aware of his situation, who knows. So the students, for instance, don't know what they are, because otherwise they would say, why do I have to pay tuition? Because I train myself only in order to go back to Saudi Arabia and work in the oil companies and so on. That means I will work for corporations, and these corporations are the beneficiaries. Therefore they should pay. By the way, the king may pay in the name of the oil companies. The king in Saudi Arabia has enough Saudis in his state operation, but he has only Europeans in civil society. He wants to replace these Europeans by Saudis, and that is why we study here. So therefore it is, if, I don't know, but if the king really pays, he should pay. But that is true for the Americans too here. They prepare themselves, to produce a surplus value for Trump or whatever, some billionaire, some corporation, and he should pay for it. That is what Clinton wants to do, right? And that is what Bernie wants to do. That should have been done a long time ago. So whoever has this consciousness is a proletarian. But otherwise, if people think they are themselves middle class, or tomorrow they themselves will be rich, or their children will go to Western and will get middle management and so on, then they have a false consciousness, right? That is called a false consciousness. And then they are not yet proletarians. But proletarians is a Roman thing. It means proles, children. That means these are the people who produce the children. And you still, in spite of the pill, you still have more children in the slums than you have in the middle class or upper classes and so on. So therefore, but with the pill, that word in its original meaning does not fit anymore. So, and why this is so new for us here is we have no working party. We have no socialist party. We have no communist party. Nothing. Mm-hmm. We have only two bourgeois parties. One a neoliberal one and a Roosevelt liberal one. And then we have the fascists now on the right. So a socialist on the left, fascists on the right, and two liberal parties in the middle. One neo-conservative, which goes back to the 18th century, and the other one follows the first and the second Roosevelt. That is all the options which Americans have. And the Republican Party should swallow up the fascists and don't do it, and the Democrats are supposed to swallow up the socialists, and they don't do it neither. That shows that the system is getting destabilized. Why? Because of the unbelievable pressure of the antagonism between the classes going deeper and deeper, showing in the income inequality. That, for instance, the entrepreneur up there or so earns 300 times more than his workers in his factory and so on. So that makes people restless, it makes people angry, and this anger is expressed on the fascist side and it's expressed on the socialist side.
How can fascists understand how it's getting expressed on liberal democratic side?
How is it?
How they would express it on the democratic
well,
side?
I mean, Bernie Sanders does express the anger of the working class. The working class has no party. The working class is not represented. It's represented by the bourgeois representatives and senators and so on, of which he is a part. And so they are disenfranchised. And the unions which speak for them, they have the right to work law in Michigan. The governor put that on, which weakens them. The first thing I did here when I came here was to found the union. So, but it is weakened by the state legislation, and so there is Reagan already, and so the tremendous struggle against the unions, which is the only representation which the workers have because they have no party. And that is not true in Canada, that's not true in Mexico, it's not true anywhere. So you have a very powerful ruling class here who condition people so that Bernie will not even come through, because as soon as they push that button, socialism, something evil, bad, and so on, so they will not listen. But it's particularly younger people, younger workers, and so on, who follow him. So his numbers are very high. But if it is enough to, then of course they think, well, he is old and he looks ugly, therefore he cannot be in the White House. And so on. So it comes all this superficial stupidity, because somebody is old and ugly, therefore he cannot be a good statesman. And on the other hand, they have a hotel builder there, and they think he will be a statesman automatically because he builds hotels. So that is what's called false consciousness, right, in the same language. Okay, do we have any other question about this movie there? So
the movie? No, actually, I have two questions about what you say.
Right.
Actually, I didn't get it. What the main issue? What is the U.S. cannot fix it? Like we have main issue, like we cannot. They try to fix it, but not. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What's that?
I mean, for instance, the class system cannot simply be fixed.
Class system.
Yes, you have 250 million workers in this country, and you have 60, 70 million middle bourgeoisie, and then maybe 1% high bourgeoisie, the real ruling class.
Okay.
And how do you want to fix that if you don't even have a socialistic party? So it is questionable if you can mitigate it at least by taking a minimum wage up to $50 or something like that. But you don't solve the class system by giving people $50 with which they cannot have a family neither. Now they get $9, So, but it's of course progress, but it will not change the class system.
Okay. Okay.
So I mean, this is many things, the civilization, that our killer instinct is not sublimated adequately, and that we murder every day 80 people of our own, that cannot simply be fixed, The question, why this civilization is not able, like other civilizations, to sublimate the libido as well, so the sexual force as well, the rape in the abuse of women on campuses, in the army, and so on and so on. This is all. That means it's a failed civilization,
Okay.
And this failed civilization cannot be fixed very simply, You would have to start out at the psychological level, the anthropological level, the sociological level, the economic level, and so on. You would have to, so you start out psychologically, Why is the will to life in us, in our people here, not sublimated enough? So there are two aspects of the will to life. One is the sexuality in a very broad sense, and the other one is the killer instinct in a very broad sense. So both of them have to be sublimated. For instance, by going into boxing matches, then you sublimate it to a football game, soccer game, and when somebody loses his head there and gets his arm broken, that is a triumphant moment, everybody. But you have to have the real thing in the end. You need the real war, But for some time you can sublimate. And the whole porno thing, is also doesn't last forever. So it has to have the real thing as well. But these measures, are not sufficient in order to sublimate in masses the will to life.
Okay.
So that it cannot be easily fixed. What I mean with fixing is that one has fast solutions, to things. So maybe I find somebody to fix my stove there tomorrow. So hopefully it takes half an hour and then it will be fixed. So some technological things can be fixed, But if you go to psychological things and so on, you have to go through an analysis for 3 years, to...
it takes time, right? It takes time to fix it. Like, it takes
takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it takes, right. And fixing is not the right word to it, it means to heal things, and so on. So it's just an expression,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And also I got another question about, you said what is the same goal for ISIS and Hitler? We wanted to achieve that.
Yeah,
goal.
right.
I didn't get it. What is this
Okay,
goal?
yeah. I mean, the idea was that ISIS, has the caliphate idea. Caliphate, the caliphate. Caliphate.
Yes.
Khilafah.
Khilafah. How should I know? Okay. So,
Baghdadi.
They are crazy.
well, now,
Insane.
crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
But Hitler, he wanted to back for Khilafah also?
No. So we have to see what the similarities are and what the similarities are not. So in history, everything is new in history. Nothing repeats itself. But there are similarities sometimes, and one has to be very careful. So one thing is in ISIS there is a romantic idea. So It's an idea which people dream of. The union of the Ummah. The Ummah be united again, you know, like it was with Turkey or whatever in the past. So it's a dream in a certain sense, right? So, and Hitler had that dream too. And Trump has that dream too. Make the country great again, you know, like it was in the past somewhere, you know, centuries ago or whatever. So it is this backward orientation to bring something in the past back into the present again, where people will feel good and be proud and they will have victories, you know. Trump says we haven't had any victories anymore. We have to have victories, etc. So there is a similarity there.
Okay.
The similarity is also the counterproductive actions. That means to get in conflict with the historically leading forces. So in Syria they got the Russians. I mean, they got the whole Slavic world, you know, against them. You know what that means? That means from Warsaw to Vladivostok, you know, the Pacific Ocean. This is colossal, you know. So that is one thing where history has moved. The other one is here, the two Americas, you know. So you have somebody in Syria and in Iraq, you know, who takes on the whole world, which is not very prudent. And what happens very often is that the very opposite of what wants to do comes about, you know. So that is, there are similarities.
And Hitler did the same thing. He
Yeah.
took on the two front runners of history.
Exactly, yeah. So that is another analogy, you know. Hitler attacked the two to whom history had moved, you know, namely the Slavic world, drove into Moscow, you know, and Napoleon had done that before. It was already too late in Napoleon's case. He marched with 800,000 men to Moscow and froze to death on the way and ran back to Paris, and all the soldiers stayed in the back. So Hitler marched with 4 million people. So it is not a small effort, you know. 4 million people from all the countries of the European Union now, Dutch, Spanish, and so on. They all marched with him in order to conquer atheistic Bolshevism. And so then they came to Moscow. They thought, you know, 6-7 weeks it would all be over. And then it got cold, you know, and the tanks froze and the airplanes froze and so on, you know. But he didn't give up, you know. He went further to the Volga, you know, from the Dnieper River to the Volga. The river is full of blood. 27 million Russians died. We always talk about 6 million Jews, you know, but there were 27 million Russians which were killed by them. 4 million men killed 27 million people.
Yeah.
Too much, yeah,
So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So well, these are the similarities. So now we have to be very careful with that Hitler thing, you know. Also with Trump, you know. Hitler was intelligent. Trump is stupid. That is a great difference, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if Trump had the intelligence even of a Mussolini or Franco or Salazar, you know, or the Croatian guy, that would be really more dangerous, you know. But the limitation of his intellect, you know, is a rescuing moment, you know. But who does guarantee, you know, that in the next round, the next fascist will not be more intelligent than he is, you know. That is the great danger for the country, because it's not so much the leader or the symbolism, it is the disgust and the anger of masses of people who are caught up in this antagonism. They live only one life, and they live it over there on the north side, in the slums, right? On the other side of the railroad station. And there is a slum in Flint, you know, and now they're even poisoned in the slums in Flint, you know, with bad water. So
Yeah.
there's a slum in Detroit, there's a slum in Chicago, there's a slum in Boston, there's a slum in Washington. The whole country consists of urban and rural slums. Of course they are, and no education, insufficient education, so people don't even know where they are. They don't know exactly who is the cause for their misery. They are told they are the cause because they are so damn it lazy. That's why they don't get anywhere. They have all the opportunities and they don't use them. Well, do they have the opportunities? And so on. So that is, it is something underneath. You see, it's not so Trump or whatever. It's not so Hitler on the surface. Who produces those guys? And who produces the millions of people who are following them and are excited by him, you know, and stand for hours in the cold air there waiting for these unbelievable revelations which he has to offer. So that is, you have to see the whole thing, right? Okay, let me see. What you do in the sociology department of pedagogics here is you start with the particular and you go to the universal. But the critical theory does that too. But it also starts with the whole and goes to the particular. Let me say, for instance, the family. You can talk about all these family problems, particular problems: premarital sex, birth control, divorce, euthanasia, not to take care of the old people, and so on and so on. So these are all particular things. But you can also turn it around and you start from the whole, the family, which consists of marriage, property, family property, and the education of children, and the transition of children into civil society, into the jobs, which they get through their education. So that is the whole. And then you can go down and say, what does premarital sex mean or so? What does birth control mean? What does the abortion rate really mean for this family? And so on and so on. Yeah. What does poverty really mean when there is no familial property there? What does divorce mean when there is no father there or no mother there or whatever? So you see, you get another view when you come from the whole and go down to the particular. You do have people in the university who are holistic, who try to do that, right? But it is very often not thought through well and so on. But nevertheless, we are aware that there are two ways of thinking. You can start with the particular, and that's what we do most of the time, and get lost in the particulars. Or the Europeans are very much for the forests, and Americans are very much for the trees. We look at the trees all the time and forget the forest. The Europeans sometimes look at the forest and forget the trees. If one would get both of them together, that would be very good. Okay, is there any other question about it? Whatever, you are not bound to the movie there.
Okay. Actually, I have questions coming in my mind about the Marx theory.
Yeah.
And I read about he had a theory called people create a god. Does he have that or not?
Yeah. Okay. So the movie showed three definitions of religion, right?
Okay.
One was the opium.
Okay.
So your bourgeois teachers, we don't use the word, no. So your middle class teachers, they say all the time, Marx said religion is opium for the people. So he is a bad man because he is against religion. So now, but Marx didn't do it. I even took my class to the psychologist in the hospital. And the psychologist said that Freud said religion is opiate. So we enlightened him and said it wasn't Freud. Freud was innocent. But then we had Marx, but then Marx didn't say it. But his teacher Hegel said it, and he said the Hindu religion was opium for the people. But he learned it from his teacher, and that was Kant. And Kant alone gave the definition of what it is. So opium religion is one which makes you feel good. Think those mega churches, God gives you wealth just to pray hard and you get rich. Makes them feel good and dulls the conscience, so that they sit side by side of the slums and don't even feel bad. Or that they send a little Christmas parish over there, or collect, like we do in church, we collect the toilet paper for people downtown. What kind of an economy is that which cannot even provide toilet paper for its people? Whenever you see the charity work, of Muslims or Catholics or whatever, what kind of an economy is that which needs all these charity apparatuses? Why can't the businessmen not provide for the needs of the people toilet paper or housing? Why all these street people and so on and so on? It's all wrong, But the false consciousness is to produce daily an appearance behind which all that disappears. Okay, but I'm not at the end yet. I come to you then after that. Okay, so therefore it's important that one makes not, a guy guilty like Marx for something he was not guilty of. He never attacked Mohammed. He never attacked Moses or whatever. He never attacked Jesus. What he attacked was the bourgeois religion which made a mess out of all the teachings of Jesus. So he went from one teaching of Jesus after the other and found out that they appealed to his name all the time and did the very opposite. Love your enemy. They bombed him to pieces, And don't do revenge, eye for eye and so on. Be tolerant. No, they're not tolerant, They kill the Jews or whatever. So the critique of Marx is the critique of bad religion. But positivists do not have a good and a bad. So therefore all religions are the same, no matter if they're good or bad. So the little nuns here who work there, you know, that is not exactly bad religion. They had a school, they had a hospital, they cared for the prostitutes downtown, they had a house for the prostitutes and so on. So religious people do a lot of good things, and then religious people do horrible things. The Crusades, you know, against Islamic people and the Jews and so on, and the killing and the murdering. I mean, Hitler's march to Russia, that was a crusade, you know. Bush's march in the Near East into Iraq and Afghanistan, that was a crusade. That was supposed to be a religious thing. So horrible things are done in the name of religion. Religion is criminal. And it is at the same time also sometimes very good. Mother Teresa or whatever, right? And again now, if you have no dialectical thinking in the population, they can only think one thing. So they either say religion is bad or the religion is good. But that the same religion can be at the same time good and bad doesn't go into his head. So we discussed that with the rabbi up there, and when he had the two opposites, he always lost his speech. He didn't know anymore what to say next because his brain malfunctioned. So, and no outside research of your brain does anything do about this, right? So it's something inside, thought and so on. Contradictory thoughts which they cannot resolve and so on. And that is the whole nation like this. So therefore Marx was attacking bad religion. He was attacking opium religion. But he had also some sense for a religion which was the outcry of the oppressed creature, like in El Salvador, or the coffee workers, right, who are exploited and become religious and express their pain through religion. And religion is the heart of a heartless world. The capitalistic world is brutal. So when you are in New York and so on, and you're on the street, and there are the pimps, and there's the police, and they are on the take, and at the end of the street, you have a little chapel with candles and so on. You have some consolation. No, it's the heart of a heartless world. Now, these two definitions are not so bad, right? So now the bourgeoisie has turned it all around, you see. The bourgeoisie says he is against religion and teaches that in all the classes, you know.
So in fact, did he criticize the way bourgeois would use religion, or
right.
he thought really that religion itself by nature is a negative thing?
Yeah.
So I mean, a true, honest, authentic Marxist must be non-religious, right? Or he could still be religious.
Well, let's take it more positivistic and concrete. Now, what is his critique of Jesus? So he had his children. He took his children to church on Sunday. Why? In order to listen to the music.
Jesus?
Marx. Jesus didn't go to church. Jesus did not go to church. Marx took his children to church, and then he listened to the music because he liked the church music. And so the children said, "What's all the music about?" And he said there was a poor carpenter, and the rich people murdered him. Now that is the most adequate type of Christology, because Jesus said, rich people cannot enter the kingdom of God. You cannot serve Yahweh and at the same time money. You will either love money and hate Yahweh, or love Yahweh and hate money, and so on. So the rich had no chance, and so on. And as he provoked them, they were then planning to kill him slowly. It took months and months, and so on. And he even discussed it. He said, "You are not the children of Abraham because you want to murder me. If you were the children of Abraham, you would not murder me. You are not the children of Yahweh, because otherwise you would not like to murder me, but you want to murder me. That's why you're not the children of God." So there were long discussions about this. Yeah. However, if they are adequately reported or not, that's all higher criticism, of course, how that is to be read and so on. But Marx, taught that his children, and the children never forgot it. But they did never take that bourgeois Jesus, who was a businessman or whatever, or made people rich, or things like this, right? Or the fellow there, the Polish priest who blessed the atomic bomb which was thrown on Hiroshima. He put holy water on it. That's bourgeois religion. And when he saw the pictures of what they had done in Hiroshima, and saw all the burned children and so on, they planned the next one a few days later, and he blessed the next bomb again on top of it. That is the most evil religion you can think of. So, yes, there is evil religion, and you could say a lot of it is probably evil, but there is also good religion, and to keep both of them, that is that means dialectics, this dialectic thing. That means there's a contradiction in everything, and there is a contradiction also in religion.
So, because you and what I understood from you on the last time, that religion played a role standing against liberalism, comparing to, there are the socialism, liberalism, and fascism.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And religion played important role standing against fascism and liberalism.
Yeah. But liberalism has a religious core. That means origin. It comes from Calvinism, right? So it comes from Protestantism.
Yeah.
So liberalism has slowly been secularized, and sometimes you still have some religious things like God bless the king or God bless the country.
But in fact, Marx, the way he saw socialism, he made the religion that it was really evil thing. I mean, the way at the end,
that's the bourgeois thing. Now you fell victim to the bourgeoisie.
I think part of the problem, Rudy, with understanding Marx and religion is that the only thing that we ever read on Marx was when he's critiquing, and he might not differentiate so clearly.
Yeah.
And so people never read what his daughter said, which was about the carpenter, or his Abitur.
Yeah.
The writing.
Right.
For instance, when we wrote that thing for Eric Fromm, and you talked about the divine spark, that Marx wrote about in his Abitur. You know what Abitur is. And remember, the editor said, "Where did you get this from? This is nowhere."
Yeah, we wrote an article together for the Harvard thing there, and they wanted to know. They had never heard about this, and so on. So, see, the bourgeois is selective. They turn the whole Marx guy or the Freud guy. That's what one has to be careful. I think the presupposition of the whole error is that they are not presupposing that there are two types of religion. That religion can be perverted.
Okay, what I was understanding before that, religion could be good, and is not a problem in religion itself, but the problem is in the way people use religion. But at the end of the day, this is the reality. So religion is bad because in the reality, this is how Marx was thinking. Well, in the reality, religion is bad because it's being misused. So religion is shit.
Okay, insofar as it is abused, it's really bad. So he attacks the bourgeois religion in London, in Brussels, in Washington. Here, you go down there and look what they are looking. They make themselves feel good, Instead of taking responsibility for what they did wrong, they said, he died on the cross and he took it all from me, I mean, what an irrational thing that somebody else, has to die for your misery instead of you reflecting on what you did and see if you can make something good, maybe. So that it is the opium religion, which they attacked. So, and this is, of course, in Hinduism. So Hegel applied it to Hinduism because making you feel good and saying Om, 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 and so on, you forget to build bridges, and the people live under the bridges instead of building houses and so on. So that is evil religion, So these mega churches don't do anything about the American class system. They don't do anything about the North Side and the slums in Flint and the slums in Detroit and so on. Nothing. So this religion, which makes you comfortable living side by side, today I saw a drone flying around there on the television here. A drone which was planning to bomb Syria and so on. This is paid. We are paying for us. You see, I pay the taxes for this. I'm guilty, right? Yeah. But religion says this is a good thing, The priest says it's a good thing. The rabbi says it's a good thing. Because the rabbi never had it so good as he has it now. Therefore, he is for the state of Israel, no matter what crimes the state of Israel commits. That is evil religion, right?
So at the end of the day, religion practically is opium is bad. So how
insofar as it is opium, it is bad, yeah. But it is not only opium, because, he quotes Jesus continually, Marx,
Did he ever point out any type of religion that's not opium? Or for him... Jesus, and Muhammad too, and Moses too.
He wasn't new. Engels, of course, wrote about Thomas Müntzer.
Yeah, Thomas Müntzer, right, the revolutionary.
But devoid of
Catholic priest, Of course there is good religion, you know. But your bourgeois teachers in Egypt and here have told you, and in Germany, have told you the wrong thing. Okay, so...
He talks about them devoid of religion, though. They do individually good acts, but in their creation of a thing that is larger than themselves, then the falling apart occurs. And the idea for Marx is the idea is if you have, because his goal is a heart-filled world, not a heartless one. So if one gets a world that has heart, then the religion serves no purpose because the people will have no way to do it. It's like his class system; he expects it to fall away.
Yeah.
To transcend religion altogether.
Yes.
Right. So by in some ways fulfilling religion, we transcend it.
Okay.
But does he have? I would argue.
Well, in terms of fulfilling that, there are certain values and principles in it that he wants to make universal, right?
But they're not in the religion; they're in the individuals who are represented in religion, not in the religions themselves.
Well,
okay.
I mean,
See the whole.
What do you mean by that?
Now, Marx is one of those who thinks that there is a triplicity in human reason. So, in the beginning, there was primitive communism of hunters and food gatherers and so on. That was 10,000 years ago, before agriculture was introduced in the Near East. So he doesn't want to go back there, right? Then this communism through private property begins to become antagonistic. The antagonistic slaveholder society, the antagonistic feudal society, the antagonistic capitalistic society. And then the issue is that there will be a conclusion. Now you may say that this needs more faith than Jesus and Moses and all of them together. But it is the fundamental logic of which the Kantians and all these people think that is intrinsic to us. That means we have a reason in us which functions in triplicity form. And so there is, like in the logic, there is a notion, there is a judgment, and the German word for judgment is Urteil. Urteilung. That means an original particularization. So there is the primitive unity of communism, the particularization of slavery, feudalism, and bourgeoisie, and the capitalism, and then the issue of socialism, which leads slowly to communism. So there is no communism. Now, under this conclusion, then, that opium religion will not be necessary anymore. People will be able to live without opium. Why do these dog lords pump all that drug in here? If there were no consumers, they would all become poor. But we are buying it. We make them rich, and so on. The guy whom they just caught there, he even wants to have some sympathy. They will make a movie about him, how poverty-stricken he lived, and that drug was the only way I could make a business. But it's not him who sells, it's us who buy, because with us, he would not have a market. Now, why the hell do we have such an unbelievable market, not of religion, but real drugs? Because there is so much suffering. So if that disappears, we don't need drugs anymore, not the chemical ones and not religion ones. So, but what the real religion of Marx was, my friend Walter Dirks wanted to write about this if the fascists had not prevented him, and that is Spinoza. So that means pantheism, and pantheism is sometimes a pious name for atheism. So if you want to call somebody a bad name, you call them atheism. If you wanted them a good name, then it was pantheism, because nature and God are the same, are identical, and so on. So that is a whole problem. But one cannot say Marx is a sociologist, of course. He was critical of bourgeois religion, of course, and in that sense he was an atheist because he did not believe in the idolatry of these churches. He was a good Jew, second and third commandment, idolatry is the most horrible sin, the idolatry of capital, and so on. So that, in that sense, he was an atheist, but not in the sense of a philosopher. As a philosopher, he was probably in the camp of Spinoza, as so many people were.
Religiously or not?
Huh?
Was he atheist religiously?
Not religiously, no. I don't think so.
The book that this communist
manifesto.
Yeah. So when you read it, this is what I felt when I read it. The way he sees this good world after this idea being practiced is the religion is out, churches and all these guys is the way.
But as a historian,
he didn't suggest any type of religious life to exist at any way. He just suggests this all shit to go away. And then this one thing. Another thing, the way he praised the works of Darwin and so on. It gives very clear.
Darwin was a Protestant theologian, an Anglican.
Yeah, but he said that this is what was very meaning to declare that there is no God and so on, to prove that there is. We don't need God for anything on this. To explain everything materialistically without any.
No, I mean Marx was not a materialistic metaphysician, right? So it has nothing to do with nature or whatever. So one has to be. You took my thought away, which I wanted to say there. But what was your first thought before you had the second one? You can't remember neither.
The manifesto, but the communist
Yeah,
manifesto.
I mean, what is gone is, of course, the slaveholder religion, the Bible songs or whatever. What is gone is the feudal religion, with the feudal church and so on. What is gone is bourgeois religion, right? That is the process of determinate negation, which is another word for dialectics.
No state, no family, no religion.
It would all wither away, but also the state, insofar as it is an instrument of capitalists, as it is here now with the money, as an instrument to pursue their interests. So that, for instance, when the capitalists need something in Guatemala, then they go to the government and they send an airplane like they did in the 50s and bomb the whole town out, you see, and so on. So that means the government is an instrument of the capitalistic class to secure their markets in Vietnam so that they can steal the rubber, and in El Salvador that they can steal the coffee, and in Iraq so that they can steal the oil. And if they cannot get the oil, then they bomb it to pieces, because ISIS is not supposed to get it. So the billions of dollars they just bombed to pieces in recent days. And now they go to Libya, because in Libya they can find the oil and so on. So the religion, insofar as it is opium religion, will go. The bad religion certainly will go. And the state, insofar as it is a bad state, namely merely not the community of the citizens governing with each other, but an instrument of the ruling class, of its slaveholders, feudal lords, or capitalists, to pursue their particular interests. These particular interests makes the people so angry, so that then Bernie or Trump, on the right and the left, can express what they cannot express because they don't really educate enough to know what produces their misery. What is their fate? That system is their fate, not a divine fate or whatever. It's their self-induced type of a fate, because they work for that fate. They produce the capital of the capitalists, and they're not even aware of it. They produce their own chains. So now, the withering away, all that is in the Communist Manifesto, all that is sociological, So if that conclusion, so you have the beginning, right, communism, origin communism, then the development of this communism, and then the conclusion in the end, namely a communism which in itself preserves all what has been achieved in the meantime. That is dialectics. That is determinate negation. If you think that way, then you are a dialectician. If you don't think that way, you are a positivist. What do you want to be?
I want to be both.
Okay, what time is
about
it?
15 minutes if you want to.
Yeah, okay, so let's do that for our relaxation. We have worked enough. So what our plan is here, as we discuss this, we discuss it contextually, because the critical theory was not developed, as you saw it in the movie and so on, just in empty space or whatever. Not some Ivy League colleges, professors who were sitting in the glass house or whatever. But they were in continual correspondence with the liberalism out of which they developed, and with the fascism then, which almost killed them and gassed them and so on, and with the liberalism again in America, and also with socialism wherever they found it. And so we want to emphasize the fascist thing. And the first thing which we will see is the meeting which the German government arranged in
Wannsee.
Where?
Wannsee.
Oh yeah, Wannsee. W-A-N-N-S-E-E. Wannsee is a lake near Berlin in Germany, and it was a house which belonged to a Jew, and it was taken away from the Jew, and it was then owned by the fascist party, by the Nazi party, After the war, I gave a talk there too.
Wannsee.
Wannsee, yeah.
South of Berlin.
Yeah, south of Berlin. So, and so there was a meeting in 1943, I think it was, where Heydrich, that is one man, is the main man there. Who was Heydrich? He was a high SS officer who then was led the whole thing, and the plan was, and it was secret, it was kept secret. So of this movie there, only one copy was rescued, all the others were burned. Otherwise, the movie is based on this one copy which was saved. Because they had to burn all their scripts, but one kept the script, and that's why we know. So the script is historical. The movie is, of course, made about it. So, and so Heydrich, there he comes, the piece of the Storch there, it was the German observation plane there for the artillery. So here comes Heydrich there. A few months later, he was assassinated in Prague by terrorists, as they called them at that time. There were terrorists there too. And so he leads this whole thing, and here the decision was made to kill the Jews, to gas the Jews by Cyclone B. And nobody was supposed to know about this. Everything was burned. And this is the guy who was sentenced to death in Israel, Eichmann. There, he plays Eichmann. So Heydrich was the highest leader, Eichmann underneath. Eichmann was by the Secret Service, Israeli Secret Service, was caught in South America, was brought to trial in Jerusalem, and was then executed, and his ashes were put in the Mediterranean. So that is the meeting here, and they met the different representatives of the different departments and told them what would happen, that this would happen all over Eastern Europe or Western Europe. The Jews would come together, and the camps where the killing took place, all that was organized here in this town. There are sometimes, you hear yesterday and today you have about Landstuhl in Germany. That is where I was stationed in the German Air Force. That's where the American Air Force is now. So that's how history moves sometimes. And so when I hear that name, my whole life comes back to me. So, and this is here, that is the Wannsee experience. So that is Eichmann. Well, he plays Eichmann there. And you see that original Jewish villa. So that was the Jewish bourgeoisie in Germany, who after the French Revolution were then emancipated and could move everywhere, and were very successful in business, in music, in academics, and so on. And then you had the backlash, the fascist backlash against the Jews and their successes. But particularly against Rothschild, that is the Jewish high finance, which financed the First World War, and then the revenge. And this revenge is planned here. That is the SA there, SA men. So you have the SS, which were the more educated people. The SA were the working class people. So Hitler is not a revolutionary. Hitler is a counter-revolutionary. He called himself, I am the most conservative revolutionary. You know, repeated that, Reagan. So it has come over to us. The revolutionary, the Trump looks like a revolutionary, but they are counter-revolutionaries. They counter a revolution, namely the socialistic revolution.
You gentlemen need, please don't hesitate to call an orderly or me. My appreciation to the man who picked this spot. General, thank you.
So Eichmann picked this Jewish villa as a spot, and so they are very happy about this.
So where do we go? The Major has come a long
So
way.
there you see the leadership, so the SS and the SA, which were parties in the German. They took over the parliament, or the parliament was sent home. Hitler asked for the emergency laws. The parliament was sent home, and then he constituted his own parliament of one party.
Staatssicherheit, oder? Steht for
Security. Security force, yes. They were both security forces, particularly against the communists and so on. Yes.
We believe it was owned by Jews.
How many doctors and lawyers were there?
They were had all a doctorate. Most of them had a doctorate, yeah.
Gestapo came later, or what? Gestapo?
The Gestapo is something separate. That is the secret police.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the Mercedes there, a beautiful car. I have one in the garage there. You can look what it looks like.
It's running like a damn truck.
They claim that they replaced all the belts and the plugs, but it sounds like it's mint mixer.
Now, that is the guy, the civilian, is the head of Hitler's government. So Hitler was in the East. He led the war against atheistic Bolshevism. So he was not in Berlin. So in Berlin he had his own government, and he was the head of that home government, and he did not even know that the Jews were to be killed. So there is no Hitler signature for the annihilation of the Jews at all. It was all done by underlings of him. So because, and that is a sad story for the Jews, it was for Hitler only the footnotes. The Jews had produced the Bolsheviks. That means the idea of equality, and that ruined the world. Therefore they had to die. So therefore 27 million communists had to die and 6 million Jews. That is the plan. That was the plan. And the plan was human species. Like nature, it must be unequal. There must be winners and losers, and the liberals have that in common with the fascists.
Here we are. And how are you? Very well, thank you. I'll make sure that the general sees it. And when will the general arrive? He should be on the ground any moment.
So the general, there comes the general there. He flies his own. I never knew how these planes could stay in the air there. And they were also so easy to shut down. But now nobody thought they were worthy to be shut down. So therefore, nobody ever shut them down. In spite of the fact that they observed, they were the observers for artillery. So they showed the goals where the artillery should shoot at. And one should think somebody would like to shoot them down. But they were never shut down. I never saw any of them shut down.
Because they never thought he would be in one of them.
Hmm?
They never thought he would be in one of them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what was behind it.
Partisans killed in Protestants in Prague?
Yeah, in Prague. You have partisans who then took refuge in the church, and the church had to suffer for it.
Here comes the lawyers.
Yeah. This is the guy here in front who made the racial laws. You know, the Trump there with his race business against Semites and, well, he has a Jewish wife, but against Arabs and... Trump has a Jewish wife, yeah. That's something which doesn't fit. But most fascists had good friends, Jewish friends, Jewish doctors and so on.
Hi, Hitler, welcome. Yes, it's Herr Hitler, thank you for the welcome. General Heinrich not here, as I expect. Am I correct? Yes.
Okay, I was wrong. This is the representative of Hitler's headquarters in Berlin there. So some of them were quite intelligent, others were unbelievably stupid. Some of them, one of them there, he gave speeches, and in the school, we all had to sit there and listen to his speech. He was drunk while he gave his speech. And the teachers were so embarrassed that we had to suffer that through. So this guy there in the middle, he made the Nuremberg laws, which then were published, and the Jews had to wear the yellow star there, and they could not have any professions anymore, and so on. That was made there. That's the SA guy. That's what the SA looked like.
Tell him Crossword is right. And the others?
They all had a very powerful ego.
For Goering, Paul Reichsmarshal Goering, yes, his office. And you, sir?
Luther. And what is your plan? Where will we be in 4 years?
Also, ironically, nobody believed what the other said. So.
Hi, Hitler.
Welcome, sir.
So one is an SS man, the other one is an SA man. And the SS looked down on the SA because they came from the working class. And the SS came from the bourgeoisie.
That is what I've been hearing, and that is why I'm late.
Not at all, sir.
So is there beer?
Yes.
And where is the boys' room? I have been briefed by the government.
Sometimes they had homosexual tendencies, the SA. The leader was Röhm, and Röhm was shot because he was a homosexual. But for some time he was a homosexual openly, and nothing happened to him. But then he made a putsch in Munich, and then he was killed.
Under Hitler?
He was a good friend of Hitler. And his good friends, he sent him a gun into the prison and told him to shoot himself. And he said Hitler would come himself, and so the police shot him. Homosexuals were all put in the concentration camps.
I suspect that is why this reason, which is under my department after all, is being called that, yes?
This is what the invitation suggested.
He's from the Vice Chancellor?
Yeah. So this guy comes from the Chancellery and doesn't know what they want to do. He doesn't know that they want to kill the Jews. So that means Hitler was not really immediately in the play. But he had prepared the whole thing. That means he had said 3 times that if the Jewish high finance, that's Rothschild from Frankfurt and now in Paris and New York, if they initiate another war among Aryans, it will not be the end of Europe, it will be the end of the Jewish race. And that is what happened here then. When the Pearl Harbor happened, the World War had been established again, and then the killing of the Jews began. Then we have Wannsee. So Wannsee presupposes Pearl Harbor.
Of the 1,000-year plan.
Bormann didn't get to the Nuremberg
Yeah,
trial.
Bormann he killed himself, and his son became a Jesuit.
Spoke to Chris again here?
It's progress, at least.
Oh. Hopefully.
And Hitler?
So everybody had to say Heil Hitler all the time. And recently Trump was on a picture of a journal and he held the hand up like this. But he did not defend himself. Several times people have told to him that he was a fascist and he never defends himself. Maybe he wants to be truthful. So Hitler was a weak dictator in the sense that there were many antagonistic forces inside of this totality. It was not entirely a totalitarian state. So not only the SS and SA were at odds with each other, but also these groups there, and the army was in that. It's not one army person in there. There it is, Heinrich. There it is. See, blonde hair, blue eyes. But he seemed to have some Jewish streak in him. Many of them had it, but they were hiding it. Hitler had 150,000 half-Jews in his army. So these are the people whom the Frankfurt School is concerned with. They were lucky that they were here and not over there, otherwise they would have been the object of this annihilation.
Very good. Dr. Christian, important that you be here. Let us begin.
Dictators always try to have people antagonism a lot in their...
They did. I can tell you an example of it. Yeah, there was an antagonism inside of it, under the surface.
He can be also...
Now look how a Germanic tribesman, how he really behaves. That is the Germanic tribesman there.
Starting at the first day of summer camp, let us go around the table and introduce ourselves for those who...
Look how he deals with those people.
Where is the cross? Where is the cross? They don't have the cross.
Iron Cross?
The Hitler cross.
Yes, he has one here, I think, even. I have to look again.
None of them have one.
Heinrich, yeah.
It will be.
You can see how he deals, in discourse. There is no really discourse. He dictates it all.
Race and Settlement Main Office. We deal with matters of race and settlement. Is it me? The political office is the Ministry for all we hold and administer in Eastern Poland, the Baltics, and in the Soviet. And I am the State Secretary for the Ministry as a whole. Give them your name. Maya. Doctor.
Doctor. See, PhDs. Many of them are PhDs.
For a minister. Director, Office of the 4-Year Plan.
So fascists are Keynesians and therefore have a plan, right?
I'm Joseph Müller, Secretary of State of the General Government of German Occupied Poland. How cold is it up there? Better crack out the Warsaw. Oh, now that it is run by Germans, you should be spared those Polish winters. Not the case. Schoengarten, SS, assigned to the General Government. Dr. Freisler, Ministry of Justice.
Freisler was the judge then who all these anti-Hitler people were sentenced by him. First, yeah. Okay, I think we close here. Okay, there was the last question which I want to answer here. We said that this fascist regime that Hitler was a relatively weak type of a dictator. That means what we call totalitarianism was not so totalitarian. And let me just give you an example. My father died early from cancer, so I took care of my little brother. And one Wednesday, I told my brother he should learn Latin. We went to the same humanistic high school, and that would be better for his life. And he shouldn't go to the Hitler Youth, because if he would go to the Hitler Youth, they wouldn't last very long, and then he would have nothing. Well, he was very angry. He was 3 years younger, and he ran down to the Hitler Youth and said, "My brother didn't let me come, that's why I'm late. He said you will not last very long." And so then the Gauleiter, that means the governor of Hessen, took my money away. So I went to that school, and the school paid the money, so it was very expensive. And my mother couldn't pay. She was a typist. She typewriter in a former Jewish shoe factory. So it would go, her whole salary would go into the school. So I had to leave the school. And then there was the trip of the factory, the workers. They did something for the workers, the fascists. So they put them on a boat, and then they did Power Through Joy, it was called. They made Power Through Joy trips on the Rhine River. And there my mother went to the director of the shoe factory, who had taken the place of the Jewish owner there. Schneider was his name, the Jewish name. And my mother said, "What do you think? They took the money away from my son. Now he cannot go to the school. I cannot pay." So she went on and complained, and they said, "We pay it." That means the fascist governor took it away, and the director of the factory paid for it. So only after I finally had shut down 18 American bombers, the state gave me back the school money, but there was no school anymore. But it's a good example that different branches in the same apparatus, have contradictory policies and were relatively independent from each other. So the economy did very much do its own thing. Fascism is capitalistic, and fascism, opened up the East, and then the capitalists went to the East and got cheap Polish labor, cheap Jewish labor, and so on. So that's what the state is doing, usually, and for fascists too. But therefore these capitalists did very much their own thing, and the leaders of the state did something else. So that is a good example and that was many times that this contradictory type of behavior happened.
Your mom was your mom was Jewish? Your mother was Jewish?
No.
She was a typist.
Well, okay, because you started it. I think I told you the story with this Jewish woman there, and I helped her to go to the air shelter where she would be transported to the east and so. So, and I told this story and I wrote about it many times and still don't know her name and so on. But when I delivered her down there, an SS-man came out and he said, "What are you doing?" And I had her suitcases on my bike. He said, "How can you help a Jewish pig to carry her suitcases?"
Oh.
And I said to him, I said, "She doesn't look like a pig, she looks like my grandmother." And he thought it was, my grandmother was Jewish too, and he got really upset. And it was an SS-man like this there, young fellow, looked very good. So, but nevertheless, my family had to have a family tree. And one side of the family was middle class, and the judge gave us a family tree, and there was no Jew in it. All were Aryans, up to 1500, so we were okay. Because 7 generations, after 7 generations, the Jewish gene would disappear. And that was more than 7 generations. So, but my mother looked Jewish. And so there was always a suspicion that her brothers looked Jewish. And they went very early into the Nazi party in order to protect themselves. They thought if they were in the Nazi party, they would be protected. So after the war, then I explored this, because that working class part of my family, they didn't have the means to have a big family tree, which was very costly and so. So I went from village to village, and the state has papers only up to 1880. So everything before, I had to go to the Protestant ministers. They were all Huguenots, French Protestants who fled to Hessen. So I went from one church to the other and looked up, and I traced my mother's back up to 1700. And in 1700, there was my mother's ancestor, and she had 5 children, and the husband ran away. And one day, a little Jew came from another village and came there and crawled into a bed. And out of this came a little girl, which is in the background of my grandmother, and she was half Jewish. But maybe she was only quarter Jewish. But it was enough and powerful enough that my daughter Maria still looks Jewish. And my brother's one daughter also looks Jewish. So after 7 generations, it's still not gone. But if they had found out that, if the Nazis could have found out, they could not have done anything against my mother because it was more than 7 generations. But my brother, he drove with me, he was horribly upset, and he could never really sleep anymore from that on. He thought we had something like this. And I was always very proud because I think they're very intelligent people. And maybe the little bit of intelligence we have is coming from there. Yeah. Okay, see, when you ask those questions, that's what's coming out. Okay, so for the next time, just look at your syllabus, right? Print it out. You have the roadmap now, and you had some examples today what that means to go into the critical theory of religion. I gave you also that paper for those of you who are interested in education, right? So there is an education part to the critical theory, and you can keep that for yourself. Okay, take the cookies, eat up the cookies. I cannot eat them. Take the water with you.
Almost the plate itself.
The plate is gone?
Yeah, almost.
Good, okay. Well, whatever is still there, take it with you. Don't lead me into temptation.